Hey everyone, it's Colleen, the Preparedness Pro. I've got another great show for you today. Let me get Instagram on board here. Instagram's always got a lag behind everybody. I don't know what's up. It's a diva. Okay, so let me just share with you what we're going to do today. We are going to if your idea of unwinding is doom scrolling through headlines and checking your email while brushing your teeth and panic Googling, why am I so tired at 2 a.m.? Buckle up, because today's episode is the screen time intervention you didn't know you needed, but absolutely deserve. We're talking to a certified life coach and digital addiction expert who's on a mission to rescue your brain from the glow of that glowing rectangle you can't stop holding. She's breaking down how our screens are sneakily hijacking our sleep, our sanity, our relationships, and even our ability to learn. Yes, Susan, even you, the one with 3 productivity apps and the Pinterest board about digital balance. But don't worry, she's not here to shame us. She's got 6 powerful practical ways to reverse the damage and get your real life back without moving to a yurt or joining a rotary dial support group. So silence your notifications, put your group text on read, and maybe, just maybe, make eye contact with a real human today, okay? This episode might be just the reboot you didn't know your brain was begging for. Thank you so much for being with us, Mary Catherine.
Well, thank you for having me on, Kelly, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation and sharing with your listeners.
Now, I didn't want to butcher your last name, so we need to give everybody your full name, but I didn't ask for it before we got started for you to correct me on. So please tell, it's Mary Catherine.
Sure. My last name is Lisinski.
There we go. I can't spell it, that's for sure.
Okay, that's okay. And the spelling will confuse you as to how it's pronounced. So.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for that, Mary Catherine. Okay, so let's start with your origin story. What made you the Batman of battling digital addiction? Was there a single moment that made you say, enough, the screens must go down?
I don't know if there was one single moment, but here's what happened. I'm also a licensed professional counselor, and I wanted to start working more with families. And I quickly realized, hey, you know what? It feels like the number one issue that families are struggling with is arguing over screen time, right? Those, screaming matches between a parent, child, teenager, and it's just tearing families apart. And I don't like to see that. And so I began studying and I got certified to say, hey, you know what? We don't need to give up. This is worth the fight or the effort to protect ourselves from too much screen time and kids. And so that's how it all got started.
Wonderful. Okay, so what's the weirdest side effect of too much screen time that most people have never heard of? Maybe probably experience every day?
I don't know if I would call this weird, but I would call this the most sneaky one. And that would be the hormone disruption. So the first thought you might have about that is about sleep. So yes, definitely too much blue light will cause your melatonin to not turn on properly at night to help you go to sleep. But then it also, melatonin helps to produce serotonin and dopamine regulation and all kinds of other things. And we can talk more about light later, but our hormones, not only do we need the right amount and right level of hormones, but we need them to come on and turn off at the right times of day. And so it's not just melatonin, it's other hormones as well. Cortisol, all of those.
So that's why when somebody says, I'm just going to spend 5 minutes on my phone and scroll, and they end up until 2 a.m.
I know, it happens. It happens, and it is so not good for any of us.
Okay, so you're working on a book. Can you give us a sneak peek at what readers will walk away with? Because a book on this topic is, I can only imagine how much work's going into that.
It is. I have loved working on this book. Here's what separates my book from other books out there that you will see that are written about digital addiction and what to do. My book is just full of solutions. These other books that I have read many, many of, so the solutions are an afterthought, or they're like in the very last chapter or something like that. And my book is about half of it is about the problem and half of it is about the solution. And so we're going to, talk about problems and solutions today, but it has a lot of solutions. And what else is really positive about it is it talks a lot about brain health, which is not too hard to understand. I try to write it so that it's very understandable. But here's the key of why that's important. Especially when parents are trying to limit time for teenagers and children, teaching them about brain health and saying, hey, don't you want the best brain that you can have? Hopefully, children are on board with that and say yes. And so this is how we're going to help you to have the best brain that you can have. So putting it in a positive light rather than just putting it all under, oh, we're taking all your fun away, which is what I think is how they feel at first. But saying, hey, let's look at the positives and the excitement we can have about getting you the best brain that you can have so that you can do whatever you want in life.
Okay, so let's break it down. How does screen time physically mess with us? I'm guessing it's more than just tech neck and dry eyes, right?
It is. It definitely causes a rise in metabolic syndromes. So part of that is just the sedentariness of, too much screen time. We're more sedentary than ever. And so metabolic syndromes are, high blood pressure, a high blood sugar, weight gain, things like that, that we used to only see in a small portion of adults. And now we're seeing those start in children. Diabetes, pre-diabetes used to be that, doctors really didn't see that in children. And now it's just exploding. And so even our, metabolic health, but chronic stress, I can explain more about that later as well, that screens put us in a stressed out state, and that's going to raise our cortisol, which is definitely not good to have that cortisol raised for a long-term basis, and put us in that fight or flight mode that we don't really realize, but it's there.
Well, let's talk more about that stress state. Share with us more insight into that.
Yeah. So that mainly comes from video games, but also social media. What happens is when anyone is playing a video game, their body interprets that activity as stressful and dangerous. Our bodies don't really make a difference between what is physically dangerous versus what is psychologically stressful or just, pretend, so to speak, because we know that video games are just pretend, but our bodies don't know that. And so it is in a stressed out fight or flight state that, again, is going to start those chemical processes that are not healthy for us. And there have been doctors who have said that this may be the first generation to not outlive their parents. Historically, every generation on average outlives their parents by a little bit. And doctors have said this may be the first generation that does not. And
Wow.
that's just sad. That's really sad.
Yeah, that's startling actually.
Mhm, mhm.
So, how does it rewire us mentally? How would someone even know that their brain's been digitally scrambled?
I will speak to that rewiring, but first let me talk about the original wiring. So, for young children, their brains are not fully developed yet. A human brain is not fully developed until around age 26. So, I have a little drawing here I'll show you briefly. This part of the brain is your limbic system. This is where your emotions are housed: anger, anxiety, fight or flight, worry and fear, things like that. This part of your brain, right behind your forehead, is your prefrontal cortex. And this is the part that develops the very last, the connections. You want each part of your brain that has separate functions to be connected within its different parts. And so this part develops last. This is the part that houses um, executive functioning skills and emotional intelligence skills. And when your brain is stuck in this fight or flight, low level of anxiety, it's not going to put energy into developing the connections and the neurons or the brain cells in this front part of your brain. And so we are seeing children with various types of different delays that occupational therapists are saying, we haven't really seen this before, and they are alarmed. One of the first books that I read about digital addiction was actually written by an occupational therapist who works with school children, and she's very alarmed about the developmental delays that are cropping up, and also just the delays in learning to read and write. That's also, again, really needs this part of the brain and an integrated brain between the different parts. And children are falling behind, and that is alarming. Then with the rewiring, we are also definitely learning that even adult brains, after they're fully developed, have neuroplasticity, which basically means the brain can change for better or for worse. We've seen on the medical side, when people have a traumatic brain injury, the brain can many times slowly heal itself. It can regrow connections and heal to a certain extent, which is wonderful. But when we, spend too much time on a screen, we get stuck in that, limbic system. And it really is, just wiring us to have, now there are new terms coming up called brain rot that's, affecting our memory. And, some people are calling it digital dementia, where we just can't remember what we need to remember. And so it's definitely not good.
Well, so what's happening to our attention spans? I mean, I swear I lose focus faster than a toddler in a ball pit. Is it screens or am I just broken?
I think it's at least partially due to screens a lot. I think that ADHD can have a lot of different causes, but not that long ago, the average adult human attention span was about 12 seconds. And now it's down to 8 seconds on average. And to compare that to something else, a goldfish has an attention span of 9 seconds. So
Wow.
our brains, we are getting less and less to where we can focus, truly focus straight on one thing. And again, I really attribute that to video games and screens. Specifically with video games, you are training your brain to scan that whole screen for movements, changes, noises, anything like that. So you're training your brain into ADHD. A psychiatrist has called this acquired ADHD. So we are training our brains into it, which is not good. Same thing with social media. You are scrolling and new things are popping up all the time. You have that novelty again that especially young brains get used to novel things. But then a teacher just sitting there listening to a teacher talk, that in comparison is very boring.
Hmm.
And so again, spending hours a day scrolling, you're not able to sustain that attention on a teacher. Sustained attention is what we want for learning, for focus, for relationships, all of those things.
So are we raising a generation that can Google anything but remember nothing? Is that where we're headed?
Just about, I'm afraid. I'm afraid. So again, I mentioned the development of ADHD. Again, it can have many different causes, but what we're looking for here and what we're seeing is, teenagers that are starting to develop ADHD symptoms who were not diagnosed ADHD when they were younger. So this is coming up. Instead of identifying ADHD in kindergarten, it's being identified in sixth grade, eighth grade, things like that. And so it is developing somehow, and they're connecting that to screens. Also, people need to realize that young children, they learn emotional intelligence skills. They learn executive functioning skills. And those have to be taught and modeled by parents and other mature adults. And if a child is just by themselves in their bedroom on a screen, that teaching and modeling time is just vanishing. And fortunately or unfortunately, it's true that parenting is hard work. It takes time and effort. And that's what we need to do, to say, I need to raise up my child to have the best chance to be able to function in the best way that they can when they're an adult. And part of that is protecting their brains and their ability to get those skills.
So how do share with us about how screens sneak into our relationships and cause trouble?
Mhm.
I mean, I've seen
Mhm.
or heard of, I should say, couples just sitting in bed scrolling and not even talking to each other.
I know. You see that in the bedroom. You see that at restaurants, all four people sitting there just, doing this and not talking, not looking at each
Mhm.
other. And so, for sure, just less time to communicate about what you're thinking and what you're feeling, but also, especially that light at night is just going to keep you up longer and longer. That blue light in going into your retina tells your body that it's daytime. So your body is going to be producing daytime hormones and energy and all of these things that's going to keep you up. And then the next day, guess what? When we don't get enough sleep, even we as adults get cranky, right? And so
Mhm.
then you're going to snap at your spouse, you're going to snap at your kids, and that won't be good. But also, just that, again, taking the time to teach your younger children communication skills. They need to learn, how to communicate their thoughts and feelings, how to interact with a boss, how to interact with customers. I went to lunch several months ago with many other ladies who work in management levels in different companies, and they were unfortunately really complaining about this younger generation not having the skills to be able to interact with, bosses and customers. And they were saying, we've realized we have to try to start teaching them this now, because if we just get rid of this person, the next person who comes along is going to have the same deficits.
Mm-hmm.
And so, thinking about your teenagers' chances at getting a great job, they need those types of skills, self-control, communication, patience, things like that are things that employers are working for. Employers can teach you how to do tasks, but they have a hard time teaching you emotional self-control skills.
Yeah, emotional maturity,
Mhm.
etc. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So, can you talk us through your 6 keys to reversing screen damage? Maybe give us the Cliff Notes version so that we know that there's hope for us.
Sure. So, spending time in nature is definitely a key. The atmosphere outside is very calming. Barring a tornado or a hurricane, the atmosphere outside is calming, and that's what you want your body's state to be in, that calm, relaxed, rather than fight or flight. And there are other just very beneficial things about nature. Another definitely would just be that face-to-face communication is essential for, again, a child learning how to have emotional regulation skills and to maintain the relationships that we already have as adults. Sleep is going to be another key to say, what? Sleep is when our bodies repair themselves, and when our body can get rid of toxins and toxins that are in our brains, things like that. Sleep is so crucial. When you have long-term sleep deprivation, you're more at risk for Alzheimer's and all kinds of things that are just not what we want. Physical movement is another key. We all need to move more, myself included. I, try to make big efforts to move as much as I can during the daytime. And also just knowing that young children also, they definitely need a lot of physical movement. That physical movement is a precursor to literacy skills. And many people don't know that, but now I feel like that needs to be shouted from the rooftops for sure, that children need to move in order to develop properly. Also, being in the present moment, just being able to sit still and think and absorb what's going on with your 5 senses. We need to be able to tolerate stillness and to be aware of how we are feeling emotionally and physically. Again, I think that awareness is one of the keys to being able to then regulate ourselves. If we don't even know how we feel or how to slow down, if we're just running like a rat all day long, it's going to catch up with us and we're going to have some sort of crash, and we definitely don't want that. And so also another key for many people would be faith. And so for me personally, that is the Christian faith. And so when we just think about how, we need to prioritize what's important in our lives and look to God to help us, he doesn't want us to be distracted and wasting time. I think how we spend our time, I think everyone, knows that, whether they're a person of faith or not, that how we spend our time is our lives. And so each day we make choices of, am I going to scroll or am I going to do something that is healthy and important? And so we, need to be mindful of that as well. But for many people, leaning on their faith is an important aspect as well.
Well, I have to agree with you there. But let me ask you this: out of the 6, which one do you feel is the most overlooked yet powerful?
I think that it's nature, the first one that I go through. And so not only does nature provide that calming atmosphere, also nature gives us the chance to experience the emotion of awe, to look at something and say, wow, that's amazing. I think it gives us a good perspective on life, just to slow down. And so I'm not just talking about looking at an amazing waterfall or the Grand Canyon. I'm talking about the ability to experience awe at a beautiful flower or a butterfly or a pretty sparkly rock, things like that, that we need to just slow down. And again, I just think it helps us to have a good perspective on life. Also, being outside, it's a lot easier to move and run and play and jump and be physically active. So that kind of combines the 2 keys easily. You can move inside, but it's a lot easier outside. And so I think that nature is a big key. Listen to this. This is fascinating. In the U.S., federal prisoners are guaranteed 2 hours of outside time every day. And so, unfortunately, many of us don't get near that much. But if you say, okay, kids, I'm going to give you at least as much as the federal prisoners are allowed. So get out there and I'm coming with you. Um, I think that's like a starting point. Even you may have to build up to that, but say, hey, you know what? If the government recognizes how important it is for people to have time outside and to get sunshine, it's got to be important for everybody. So,
Yeah. Okay, so without selling their phone on Craigslist and moving to a cabin, let's talk some solutions here. What are the three things that a person can do today to start detoxing from screen overload?
I would say one rule to implement today would be no screens at the table. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everyone is just talking with each other and eating. So I would say that would be number one. Another one is no screens in the bedroom. And I think that can be really hard at first if
Mm,
you and your kids are used to that.
yeah.
But that's one kind of simple, clear rule that's, again, maybe hard at first, but then easy to continue to say it's a clear rule to say we don't use screens in the bedroom. A teenager might need their screen at some point, to do homework, but beyond that, they just don't need to be in the bedroom. And then also, I think that silencing your notifications and then just only going to those apps when you want to specifically use that time for that app, I think is big. I have like only just two or three things that will come up to notify me. And I've gotten rid of so many apps that I never use. I just delete all the time. But saying, okay, maybe there's a specific time of day when I want to spend 15 minutes going to my apps to see, what's on there, to keep up. But silence those apps, because when we get interrupted, that again is shortening our attention span, I believe.
Hmm. Okay, I really want to get into the face-to-face interaction because in my faith, we have a whole lot of young people volunteering to serve missions for the church. And it used to be in the missionary training center that we got taught how to talk to people and discussions and learn about, learn scriptures and things of that nature. But now the missionary training center is actually having to teach a class on face-to-face interaction because these young people are not coming in equipped with that skill.
Mm-hmm.
Is it really as magical as you say, or are we just romanticizing eye contact because emojis don't hug back or something?
It is that critical. It's been proven many times how isolation just really is so very negative to our mental health. But again, the original learning of those skills to have that eye contact, to pay attention to body language, and to know kind of like what kind of vibe the person is putting off. And, for people that you're close to, family members, you get that oxytocin going when you are close and having a great time. But I think that modeling of, the parental, here's how I handle my emotions, and you don't say that, but your children watch you go
Mhm.
through things. And how do you respond? Do you, just have a screaming meltdown, or do you take some deep breaths and pause and know how to control those, emotions, and to help yourself to act in a mature way? And so it is, unfortunately, we're seeing now some of this generation that's like 20 to 25 years old, they're having to play catch up.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that for ones who are younger than that, it's definitely not too late. We can always learn. But just to catch it earlier, to say we've got to know how to interact. And it's just more critical than people think. But I think I had a good example, and you did as well, that, hey, this is a major problem and they're having to be taught later. And that used to not be true.
Yeah, it used to come naturally,
Mhm.
face-to-face interaction. Can you imagine being a jury consultant and not having any face-to-face interaction skills? You'd be unemployed, right?
Right.
There's so
Mhm.
many
Mhm.
professional
Mhm.
um, jobs now that I can think that would just go by the wayside if people don't have this face-to-face interaction skill.
Right. I think that's very true. And I think even with jobs that aren't necessarily with an employee, customer, client direct contact, you're still going to have coworkers, you're still going to have a boss. You've got to learn to get along. Some people unfortunately get fired because they can't get along with a coworker.
Yeah,
And so that person you cannot avoid.
yeah.
And so I think that, again, employers really value those emotional skills.
So, how does someone set healthy screen boundaries then without sounding like a joyless digital nun?
Well, I think that's what people fear, that I'll just be bored and sad,
Mhm.
without this. But from my experience, people really start to feel the emotional and mental and physical benefits pretty quickly. And then when that makes them happy, then they're glad to tell people, hey, you know what? I got off social media, or I did this or this, and I'm loving it. I haven't ever heard someone say, you know what? I took a break from social media, or I got rid of my Instagram account and I really regret it. Or I really regret, getting all the screens out of my bedroom. I've never heard anyone say that. It's all been positive, like, hey, I feel great. This is how I used to feel and I'm enjoying it. And so we do fear that, but I think it's an unfounded fear, and pretty quickly people start to feel the benefits. And so I want to encourage people that, you can do it. It's hard, yes, but you can do it. And I hope, as a coach, for people who need a little extra help, I want to be there for people.
Wonderful. Okay, so I've got some rapid fire questions for you. So
Okay.
just say the first thing that kind of comes to your mind. The screen that you'd throw into the ocean if you could.
Uh, I really would say my phone. My computer, I think I handle a little bit better, but sometimes, when I am physically away from my phone, I really feel better. I really do.
Okay.
I enjoy it so much.
An app that you're secretly tempted by but have to keep in check.
I really don't use apps. So I do have a Facebook account and I've come this close to deleting it, but I do not have the Facebook app on my phone. I
Okay.
get Facebook messages on my phone, but again, most of those are muted. And so if you're looking for honesty here, my thing that I have the most trouble with is YouTube. And so I have to really watch that. Sometimes I will start a YouTube video, but then not watch it. I'll listen to it like it's a podcast, but
Yeah.
not watch it. And so I feel like that's a step better. But YouTube is honestly what I personally struggle with, because social media, I'm barely on.
Okay, so your biggest tech pet peeve, is it autocorrect fails or buffering? What's your biggest one?
Um, I think it's when you have to go through so many steps in order to get to where you're wanting to go, or they say, reset your password, or 2 steps to this, or now we're going to send you a code on your phone from your computer, because I keep my phone physically away from me, like in another room. I can hear it if it rings, but I keep it away from me. And so those kinds of things that I have to do in order to get where I want to go, that's annoying.
Yeah. Okay, so the last time you used a flip phone or maybe wanted one?
Mhm. I had a flip phone until I was about 24 years old, and I very begrudgingly got rid of it. And I miss it. But I'll take that opportunity to say this: they are now making flip phones that are specifically designed for teenagers, but
Mhm.
also um, phones with screens. So they look like a smartphone, but they're not connected to the internet. And so your teenager can have a phone that calls and does texts, but giving your teenager just unfettered access to the internet is dangerous. And so those companies and those phones do exist out there. So
That's great.
be encouraged.
Okay, so be honest, how many browser tabs are open on your computer right now?
1, 2, 3, 7. It has been more than that before, but
I'm sure.
it's 7 right now.
Okay, so what's worse, someone texting during dinner or someone using a speakerphone in public?
Uh, Texting during dinner is worse. They're both bad, but
Yeah. Okay, if your phone could talk, what would it say about your screen time?
It would say I have too much, I'm afraid. I do use it for business, honestly, but I also can use it for pleasure. What else would it say? I hope it would say, I want to be away from you.
Okay, so how can people get in touch with Mary Catherine?
Yes. So feel free to just call me up. My phone number is 501 290 7132. So call me and ask me questions. If I can help you at all, that's great. Also, you can go to lifewalkcoaching.com. So that's WALK, lifewalkcoaching.com. You can learn more about me there as well.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you very much for your invaluable time and some some realities that we need to face. I think that it's so permeated into our society with all the screen time that we have that we just don't realize that it's literally rotting our brains. I mean, I remember as a kid watching TV and being told that's rotting your brain, and just rolling my eyes like, sure, of course it is. I'll wear a tinfoil hat. But you've enlightened me a great deal on some practices that I need to put into play.
Well, great. I love sharing with people and just helping them to know, hey, you know what? It's worth it to reduce screen time. It really is.
Yeah.
Thank
Well, I'm
you.
going to start a new practice where I'm going to make sure that I don't have my phone in my bedroom anymore. So
Hey,
that'll be great. Yeah.
that's great. Sounds great, Colleen. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. You take care.
You too.